An award to celebrate acts of pacifism, the pursuit of peace. But is the Nobel Peace Prize now more about politics than peace itself? And have the actions of some of its past recipients hurt its credibility? This is Roundtable with me, David Foster. The 2017 Nobel Peace Prize is going to be awarded this week under the shadow of a previous winner. Myanmar's de facto leader Aung San Suu Kyi is accused of being complicit in crimes against the Rohingya, and she's not the only past recipient whose peace credentials have been questioned.
It's been described as the most distinguished prize in the world. Recipients include global heavyweights Theodore Roosevelt, Mother Teresa, and Martin Luther King.
I accept the Nobel Prize for Peace at a moment when 22 million Negroes of the United States are engaged in a creative battle.
Increasingly, the Nobel Committee is finding itself at the centre of condemnation and criticism over who does and who doesn't deserve the Nobel Prize, raising a fundamental question. Does the Nobel Committee need to be more transparent and take more responsibility regarding those it decides to honour? When awarded the prize in 1991 for campaigning to make Myanmar a democracy, Aung San Suu Kyi was seen as the country's modern symbol of freedom. Once an inspiration to millions, her silence on the plight of the Rohingya has led to more than 500,000 people signing a petition to strip the political leader of her Nobel Prize. Critics accuse her of denying to others the freedoms that she fought for.
We cannot take back a Nobel Prize. We do as good as we can when we make this choice on the basis of what they have done and what they do afterwards, as has been often the issue that has been coming up. That is something we cannot do anything about, and we do not take any responsibility for that whatsoever.
Former US President Barack Obama was awarded the prize in 2009 for his efforts to strengthen international diplomacy. It's also been widely criticised. Many argued that at just 9 months into office, his nomination was premature. Obama would later become America's longest-serving wartime president. A list of the award's honorees is dominated by political masterminds. Of the 97 prizes awarded, only 16 have been given to women. Just 11 Peace Prize laureates are black. While the controversies and criticisms may continue, the Nobel Peace Prize remains one of the most coveted awards in the world. But is it an honour bestowed on the greatest pacifists of the time, or is it simply another political tool in the armoury of the elite?
And that is some of what we will be talking about. I'm joined from Norway by the former Vice President of the International Peace Bureau, Fredrik Heffermehl, with me in the studio. Former editor of the International Who's Who, Richard Fitzwilliams. To my left, Associate Professor of Politics at Richmond University, Eunice Goes, and political commentator and founder of the African Literature Book Club, Ugo Arinzeh. Thank you all very much indeed for coming on the programme. Fredrik, let me turn to you first of all and quote some of what was put out when the Nobel Prize was launched. Done for the most or best work for fraternity between nations, the abolition or reduction of standing armies, and for the holding and promotion of peace congresses. It's changed quite a bit. Has it been cheapened?
No, these words are exactly the language of the peace movement of the period. And the great strength of the period was that it was the peace movement was an alternative to militarism, to arms races, and to military alliances and power games. The peace movement had a very strong position and had the support of celebrities and leading people and politicians and parliaments. Among other, the leading parliament in support of the prize was, or the peace movement.
But with the changes there have been in the world since then, is the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize now so very different and perhaps, as I said, cheapened by the way it's handed out?
Well, today the prize has no idea at all. It's sent out in all directions like crumbs, but it had a consistent idea of the period. It was to be an alternative to spending all that money on something which would be giving us all the time less security. And it's today, after the nuclear bomb, a deadly risk to all of humanity.
Guys, in the studio, I don't know who wants to pick this one up, but why does it matter these days?
Oh, it matters because I think if you have some form of template internationally, it just generally helps overall, because if you have the Nobel Peace Prize, it has, I think over the years, all the Nobel Prizes have got that very, very special ring to them, and everybody is waiting anxiously to find out who will get the next Peace Prize.
And that is precisely why we should not go away from the initial mission, which was about rewarding achievements. And in the past, we've seen that the Nobel Peace Prize has not always rewarded achievements. It has widened its concept of peace, so it's not only about putting an end to wars and so on, so it has embraced an idea of peace, which is also about sustainable development. It's about sustainability of the planet and so on. And so all of that is very welcome. But it becomes more controversial and very political when it is awarding a Nobel Peace Prize to somebody like Barack Obama who had not yet achieved anything.
That was
or for people or Henry Kissinger, for instance, who received the Nobel Peace Prize as he was ordering the bombing
well, we will
of Cambodia.
come into particularly notorious recipients in just a moment. But Ugo, do you think it's ever made any difference to the world?
Well, I think it represents a striving for an idealism, right? And I think there's something to be said for the nobility of an idea, which is to honor people who have demonstrated acts that are about supporting peace. On the Barack Obama, I guess I feel perhaps a little bit differently, because I do feel like sometimes there's this notion of perhaps the hope of something, and perhaps that's where the prize was awarded in his case. And so I think it is still valuable, and I think it's kind of a noble construct of something that the world seeks to strive for, but it has become controversial. It has become perhaps less transparent in how these decisions are made. But in and of itself, the theory and the idea of it, I think, is still relevant.
For those of our viewers who don't know the history of it, Fredrik, I'm going to ask you to expand a little bit on Alfred Nobel himself, because the irony is a Peace Prize from somebody who invented dynamite and was involved in the arms business.
Well, he was interested in the questions of war and peace since his earliest youth, but it was very much stimulated when he became friends with Bertha von Suttner, the authoress of the Waffen nieder, the lay down your arms in English, and who became a leader of the peace movement of the period. And she convinced him to support her work. He did so while he was still alive. He joined her peace associations, and he gave money, and then he was asked by her to mention her work in his will, and he did so.
Sorry to butt in there, just bringing it back here into the Roundtable studio. There is this curious story that his death was reported, but it was actually the death of his brother that had taken place, and the newspaper headlines were "Death of the end of the Merchant of Death," and he looked at this and thought, "This is appalling. I have to change my legacy."
Well, his legacy, I do think, has one particularly important significance with this prize, and that is it does tend to shine the spotlight on individual countries and injustice. Liu Xiaobo in China, Sakharov in Russia, Vonosetsky in Nazi Germany. There is quite a list, and also individual cases where the international community and a certain amount of pressure can make a difference. Northern Ireland, the endless attempts for peace in the Middle East and so forth.
Yeah, going back to Liu Xiaobo, I mean, they politicised the whole event by putting an empty chair there, didn't they? Because China wouldn't let him out. Is there a lot of politicisation here?
Complete politicization, and I think this is what the Nobel Peace Prize Committee does. It politicizes issues, sometimes with a very good intentions. In fact, most of the time it's good intentions. It's about the committee sending a message. It's sending a message that the world should focus on these issues, or this is the path to follow in the future. This year, the most spoken name, that the potential winner of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Stop it there.
Okay.
We're going to bring that up at the very end, so everybody can just hang on and see who that one is. But politicization for good or bad reasons always?
I think politicization...
No, I think that there's definitely, for good reasons, and I think, you know, nominating someone, there's probably always going to be controversy with it. Even the Dalai Lama, who most people would say is somebody that is revered and represent, maybe besides Mother Teresa, there's going to be perhaps in the political context, if somebody is striving for peace, there's the other side of that, and one person's definition of being in the right and being deserving of this either statehood or position might be in conflict with someone else's, and so therefore perhaps it's very difficult to get out of the controversy. It's almost every person might be controversial in some context.
But the ideal example, I think, of this was Jimmy Carter getting it at the time of the Iraq War and sending a message thereby to George W. Bush that what he was doing was morally unacceptable.
Fredrik, I know you wanted to butt in. Sorry, yeah, please do.
Well, this problem here, as I hear the discussion is starting off, is that the Nobel Committee has established the idea that the prize can be used for anything, and it's all the time being a discussion as there are no limitations, there is no idea. Nobel does not, he did not have an idea when he made this will. And you cannot do that.
What's the problem with that? If you decide that somebody or some organization is the most worthy recipient, you either want to promote peace or you want to reward somebody for helping with peace. What is the problem?
The prize is not about peace.
Well, that might surprise a lot of people. It's called the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes, the goal is peace, but he prescribed a certain way to get there. And you can go on, as they do now, for 300 years, the price will not change anything. But Nobel had an idea of a fundamental change in the relation between nations. Yeah, I have to build trust, cooperation, international law, international institutions, which permit the civilization we have on the national level should be lifted to the international level. We have to bring law and order into the world.
Okay, well, Fredrik, for now, thank you. Who wants to go into the best and the worst recipients? And the most deserving who probably didn't get it?
Well, the worst must be, of course. I mean, Tom Lear, the satirist, famously said that when Henry Kissinger was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, satire died. I mean, that really was extraordinary.
And his co-recipient refused to accept it.
But equally, it's often very ambiguous, because if you look at Lech Walesa, I think we all would have cheered in 1983.
Polish Solidarity leader, later Polish president.
Exactly, but what has subsequently come out shows that Walesa's role may have been a good deal more ambiguous with links with the secret police than was known at the time. And also, I mean, if you look back at Woodrow Wilson, fair enough, one of the founders of the League of Nations, and one would obviously applaud that at the time, though we know subsequently it didn't lead to what people had hoped, but also an architect of the disastrous Treaty of Versailles, a racist, his comments totally unacceptable today, it's a problem with quite a lot of individuals.
Which one of you wants to pick up on
The good ones.
Well, okay, the good ones. You do the good ones, we'll do the ones that are missing.
I think the Nobel Peace Prize is at its best when it rewards efforts by civil society, so it looks beyond the actions of states to achieve peace. So, for instance, I can think of Rigoberto Menchú, the Bolivian Indian rights activist, who drew our attention to the rights of indigenous people in Central America. Our focus has not been on that issue, but at that time it really refocused the question of the inequalities in Central America. Malala, for instance, also the importance of absolutely, or the NGO Médecins Sans Frontières, which is an incredible NGO who does incredible work in situations of conflict.
And we should add that the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, has picked up the award for its work during World Wars. The most obvious person missing, I would say, would be Gandhi.
Yeah, and I have read that. So certainly I would have put Malala certainly in the framework of when I've become probably more aware of this prize. Certainly she seems quite deserving. Mother Teresa I would add as well. Martin Luther King Jr. I would also add. But Mahatma Gandhi was a surprise to read that he had never received that, because that does seem to be the epitome of what I see that prize for, not really truly reading down to the definition, is a prize that honors someone who represents our best characters, the angels amongst us, if you will. And even if it's at the grassroots level, a Mother Teresa would seem to be quite deserving of that, even if it's within her small circle within Calcutta, right? Somebody you're honoring for the work that she's doing that's quite selfless and represents peace, a peaceful spirit. So perhaps it's not the literal definition of what the prize represents, but how I take it from perhaps a layman's perspective is the spiritual context of what that prize seems to want to represent.
Sorry, Richard, let me throw this one in. Foreign Policy magazine this week said the fundamental problem is it began as an award for international peacemaking. Peacemaking become a general good conduct medal.
Well, to some extent, obviously, because you could argue, I mean, take, for example, the campaign against apartheid. I do think, if you look, we had Chief Luthuli, we had Archbishop Desmond Tutu, we had Nelson Mandela, who must surely get a very, very high mention, admittedly with F.W. de Klerk, because the two
Who was
together,
the president of the apartheid government?
yes, the last apartheid regime. So that is one thing that the prize clearly has encouraged, and you know, as you've been saying, with reference to international organizations, there's some particularly impressive ones there with the International Red Cross and so forth. But equally, I can't help feeling that there's one category of person that's been completely missed out. In fact, since the prize began, no member of any royal family has been mentioned. And if you look, for example, at the landmines celebrated in the prize in 1997, I would have thought, had Diana, Princess of Wales...
Did it go to the Halo Trust, didn't it? Rather than to Princess Diana?
It went, exactly, but she might...
Yeah.
This is a problem posthumously. The rules don't allow for this, but it should, I think, have gone to Princess Diana, and I would have thought changes in the rules, firstly, the possibility, which we will come to taking...
I'm going to go to Fredrik on that one now. The changes in the rules. Is it necessary to strip somebody of a title? In fact, should Aung San Suu Kyi, as some have suggested, no longer be able to say she's a Nobel Peace Prize laureate?
No, I don't think you should revoke prizes. It is an impossible task. There will be far too many to revoke. But the whole thing is to do it right in the beginning. And if they had chosen the type of winners that Nobel had in mind, they are hidden because Nobel Committee always chooses the people who are not the best winners. But if they had stuck to them, and we have now found transparency absolutely essential to repair the prize, and we have now ended the secrecy of the nominations, and we have published all relevant and known nominations who are qualified for the prize on the website of what we call the Nobel Peace Prize Watch. It's called nobelwill.org.
You see, that's life, is to some extent what Fredrik's saying, is you make a choice and sometimes it turns out later to be a bad choice. But do you think that people should be stripped of it if they behave? Who judges whether somebody's behaved badly or not?
Exactly. And I think we forget that we are awarding the prize to human beings, and human beings are neither saints or angels. So we are flawed human beings, and in many instances we are awarding it to individuals who made strenuous efforts to achieve peace in their own regions, of civil wars and so on.
And in a point of time, I think, as well, so it's kind of in the context.
And also, wars are terrible affairs. So when you have warring factions actually deciding, well, we are going to put an end to this and negotiate peace, well, negotiating a peace agreement is a really ugly business. There's a lot of shoddy compromises, and that's how we move on, and that's how we achieve peace. So to remove
so she shouldn't have it taken away? She shouldn't have it taken away?
They are much worse offenders than Aung San Suu Kyi.
I'm kind of torn, because on the one context I say no, because again it was awarded in a period of time for behavior, certain set behavior. If that changes, is there still redemption in the future, right? Is there an opportunity for her to redeem herself? So if you kind of looked at it for this specific period of time, you say, okay, strip her, and then next month you're saying, okay, now she's redeemed herself. She's perhaps put out a statement that makes everybody feel good about the Rohingya. No, let's give it back to her. So it becomes, I think, very messy. I think what might be helpful is the transparency that Fredrik talked about, and people really being clear on what are the metrics and by which someone's selected. But a point in time is a point in time, and I think that's what people need to recognize. Okay,
we're going to talk about who's likely to get it this year. I must mention one sort of really strange thing, that when Neville Chamberlain was suggested as a recipient of it in 1936, other people also put forward Hitler, because at that point he hadn't started a war. Fredrik, let me ask you this. Do you care who wins this year?
Well, I'm getting less and less interested, because I think the prize is so misused that nobody has an idea of the idea. And also the debate around the table shows this. It is not a prize for ending a war. It is a prize for preventing wars from happening. And how far they have removed themselves from the idea of Nobel is clear when I get the question from serious journalists whether Trump could win the prize this year. That you couldn't have a more extreme example of how far the prize has moved from its actual idea.
Although you did say in response to that, as another thing, I understand there is no limit to the committee's mistakes. We will wait and see, and we'll probably talk to you after the award is given out. But let me go through some facts here. Last year, 376 nominees. 376 nominees, 2016. Even more this year. Boil it down. You wanted to say some time ago.
Well, I think perhaps the individuals who are on the top five, there's Javad Zarif and Federica Mogherini from the European Union, and John Kerry as well, for the negotiation of the Iran nuclear deal. This is an effort. This was quite an important effort in terms of bringing Iran into the respectable international community. And at the same time, it also sends a message to the Trump administration that actually the way to achieve peace in the world is through diplomatic negotiations, not through confrontation.
Okay, but then Israel will be the first one to say that that was, one of the worst deals ever made. And so I think in the scope of geopolitics, there's controversy. And so I think there's always going to be a population that's going to disagree with any nominee, especially if that is a politician. I don't have, the short list of who might be considered at this point, but I think I just come back to almost the spirit of the award, and is that something that people need to look at in terms of, are we really trying to uphold some ideals and nominating people?
And we haven't really talked about geography here, have we? Because, what did we say, 10 African recipients?
And gender as well. So those are two key missing points there.
In the last 20 years, I do think, thankfully, the Peace Prize has become far more diverse compared to previous decades, which is so important. But the problem, if one refers to a prize for peace, I would have thought ending conflict is a pivotal aspect of this, because one obviously would wish there wasn't conflict. There is, hence the President of Colombia seemed to me an ideal choice after a civil war that had lasted for something like 60 years. If one considers the numbers who won the prize, who've actually taken part in an armed struggle of some sort, and one is looking now at Yasser Arafat, at Nelson Mandela, when all else failed, founded Umkhonto we Sizwe, because it was the only way to shift apartheid was the armed struggle. And also, I mean, Sadat, Begin, both had fought against the British.
Muslim to get Anwar Sadat. Fredrik, let me just ask you this one quick question. Will you be watching the ceremony? Yes or no?
Yes.
OK, thank you very much indeed. And at least we're talking about it. I suppose that's the point, isn't it?
Well, the world's watching the ceremony. I think that's one of the very crucial things. And I would just like to mention a lot of...
We don't have much time, Richard, and you've been talking an awful lot.
It matters. I think it matters a great deal because it sends a message. It sends a message to the world, and it actually indicates the path forward. You know, the path to peace now includes this particular campaign.
But it is not the prize for peace.
OK, well, at least that's been one of the most interesting things for coming out of this. Fredrik, thank you very much indeed. I just wonder if it's a little bit like, you know, your favourite football team in a world. Will you be disappointed if a certain person doesn't win?
No, I don't think. I think, as you said, it has, the Aung San Suu Kyi controversy has elevated the focus on the prize, and the timing has lined up. So, you know, as I always say, there's never bad press. So in ways, I think there is going to be an increased scrutiny on who gets nominated.
As Fredrik says, it's not a prize. A prize, I am getting this wrong the whole time. It's not a prize for peace, he says, but perhaps it does need a new set of criteria. Regardless, it is still one of the most coveted awards, one of the most talked about. Thank you very much indeed for all of you, for joining us on this edition of Roundtable. From me, David Foster, and the rest of the team, thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.